Welcome to the Code, Deploy, Go Live podcast, episode 25. I'm Andrew Connell. I'm here with Julie Turner. If you want to watch this episode as a video, head over to our YouTube channel. You'll find the link in the show notes. Today, I'm going to interview or maybe interrogate Julie about the popular open source library PnPjs. If you're a Microsoft 365 developer building any kind of solution with or for SharePoint or Microsoft Graph or any other Microsoft 365 related solution, and you haven't heard of PnPjs, or it's mostly new to you, well, first of all, like me, you're probably under a rock, but this episode is for you. You'll enjoy this discussion. Now, along the way, when you have any questions about stuff we're talking about, write those things down and send them in, because we'd love to have another episode to dive deeper on this widely popular library, and your questions would help drive that discussion. Okay, let's get to it. This episode was recorded live February the 3rd, 2026. Hey, Julie, how are you?
Hey, C, how are you?
Doing just fine. I'm not going to interrogate you, I promise. I will kind of a little bit.
That's
but
good.
You're the expert on this, and hopefully this episode it's very self-serving for me, but it's also going to be, I hope it'll be very good. Our listeners will be interested to hear about this as well. So looking forward to it. But before we dive into it, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Anything new in your life?
No, getting ready as you are probably for getting to Miami this coming later this week to do the Miami community conference. So that will be fun. And other than that, we had the corner turn with the 13-year-old who came to me on Friday with a printed out list of clothes that he wanted to buy, because he's decided that he now has to have style and he has to do his hair, which he called floofy powder. So apparently there's some sort of like texture powder that the kids are putting in their hair to make it look like huge poofy bedhead. So yeah, I'm envisioning Kramer, but I have no idea. So that, and he wanted baggy jeans. And by the way, if you go to Old Navy to buy baggy jeans, you know what it says? 90s baggy is the style. And I'm like, why are we buying these? Your father has some of these as work pants in the garage. Legitimately like jeans for the 90s. And he bought a pair of black ones and they literally look exactly the same as my husband's work jeans that he like. So it's pretty funny. Anyway, so he's apparently getting some style going. So that's the fun new phase in my life. Other than that, just same old, chugging away, coding up a storm. So lots of work to do. How about yourself? What have you been doing, working on?
Well, like you said, like you, looking forward to heading down to Miami later this week for the collab days. It's the collab days, right? Is that what it's?
No, we're collab days. She's community days. The community days. Yeah,
that's right. Community days. That's right. Community days. I'm sorry, Emily. I know you listen to the show, and I get them mixed up, but she puts on a fantastic event. I've been down there one time for it. I missed last year, but she puts on a fantastic event. Great people, great volunteers and everything. It's a lot of fun being down there. And it's one of those, I like the community events that aren't like the gigantic, like hundreds of people. This is nice manageable size. And so you can you can spend time with people, both our peers and then also people you don't get to see all the time. So
yeah. And it's a good audience. Yeah. She tries to lean into Spanish-speaking population. So it's definitely a new audience. It's not people you see over and over again. So it's really cool. I enjoy it.
It is. I mean, I think all of us, even myself included, are looking forward to Miami because getting a little bit of warmth compared to where most people are coming from the rest of the country in the U.S.
Yeah, it's pretty cold up north here. So it'll be nice. Little couple days in the warmth.
I know a lot of people were really cold, and I know people are going to laugh at me for saying that I was cold as well, even though I'm from Florida. But this past weekend, I ran a race on Sunday. It was ridiculously cold for a race. I think the start of the race was 22 degrees Fahrenheit for me.
That's so insane. And
wind chill was like 7 or 8 degrees. It was pretty windy, and it only warmed up about 5 degrees throughout the entire race.
That's tough.
It is pretty brutal, but got it done. It was fun. It's an awesome cause. I'll put a link to it because Man, I love it. People would donate, but it's called the breast cancer marathon. I'm only half crazy. I only did the half marathon. But it's the race is like the goal of it is to finish breast cancer, and they raise money for research, but mostly it's to support the families so that when a loved one is going through treatment, they do a lot of work with the Mayo Foundation to help them with the expenses, the travel expenses to come stay with their family, so that person's not all alone, and they're having to incur the expenses of having to relocate the family and everything. So they do a bunch of support stuff that it's a phenomenal organization. So
yeah,
it's
awesome.
Always nice too when you're running and it's like you're getting mile 10. And it's like this past weekend you're like starting to really struggle. It's like, okay, this is rough now. This is hard. Or like previous years it was hot and it's like, oh my God, I don't know if I can finish this. And a lady runs by you, or you run past somebody, you see on the back of her shirt, like, I just did my last round of chemo 3 days ago. I'm like, well, I can just shut up and I could just keep going because this is apparently badass and I'm a little sissy.
Yeah. Yeah. Seriously. Takes a lot of strength.
Heck yeah.
Cool.
Heck yeah. Okay. Well, what do you say we dive into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Marker. Okay, cool. All right. Julie, we've wanted to do this episode for a little bit. And I think we've got a couple episodes, we could potentially have a couple episodes that we can dive in about this subject. But I mean, we'll see how this goes and we'll see if there's interest. So if you are interested in this, you are interested in you've got questions about it, that things that we didn't go into or challenges that you're facing or just anything, please send them in. You can send them to us send us to us as a DM, or it'd be great if you dropped a comment on, actually not a DM, drop a comment on one of the places where you see this episode get published. You can send it into the newsletter. You can post a message, comment on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Spotify, on Instagram, on any of the place where we're publishing this episode. Please drop a comment in there and ask your question, because we'll use those to help drive the discussion and maybe get a couple special guests to join us as well for future episodes that are also involved in the project.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Yeah.
This is all about something called PnPjs, which is the Patterns and Practices JavaScript library. And what I wanted to do in this episode is really just kind of be like high level. And if you don't know, you being the listener, you know this, Julie, at least I hope you do.
Me too.
if you don't know what this is, if you're a developer and you don't know what this is, or you kind of know what it is, but you don't use it and you're not really sure if it's for you, this episode is for you. Because my goal by the end of this episode, our goal by the end of this episode, is to answer the what, the why, the when, the where, and the how. Not going too detailed, so you have to worry about like seeing code or anything like that, because it is a podcast. Even though it's a video show, we're not going to do any code. But it's more or less we want you to walk away from this episode and say, it is for me, or it's for me, but not on this project, but it might be good on this project, or I'm doing this and it replaces that. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds perfect.
Let me ask you,
cool.
let me start off with this then.
Yeah.
How would you describe what PnP, actually, first of all, what is your role on PnP? Why am I talking to you about this first?
That's probably the best place to start. So the Patterns and Practices team has a bunch of resources that they share with people. And so for those who are familiar with that, we renamed PnP. It's been called PnP for years and years and years. We renamed it to the Microsoft 365 and SharePoint and Power Platform Community. God, it's such a mouthful that I can never remember it. Anyway, it used to be called PnP. And so a lot of the SDKs and stuff that the community members maintain go by a label PnP. So I am a co-maintainer of PnPjs along with Patrick Rogers, who is the original creator of PnPjs, and Bo Cameron, who also helps co-maintain the library. So the three of us sort of work together to, build and maintain the library, enhance it where we can, and answer questions that people have and help them debug their solutions if it's a bug in the library, which at this point we've pretty much worked them all out. So it's a pretty stable library at this point. But essentially, I am one of the co-maintainers. So that's the origin. And just a little more in the sense that, so when I said Patrick Rogers is the original creator, he created this library when he wasn't working for Microsoft. So before he started working at Microsoft, he created this library because he was a consultant. And that was back in 2018. And so that was version 1. And I joined Patrick in the transition from version 2 to version 3. So that was a complete rewrite of the internal guts of the library. And so I joined him then. And then between version 3 and 4, Bo joined us. So that was sort of how we got to 3 people instead of Patrick sort of doing it all by himself. Even when he was working for Microsoft, he was still sort of maintaining it all by himself. And then I joined him and et cetera. So
you're going to add somebody when you go to V5. Is this, I'm noticing a trend. Oh, okay.
No.
There you go.
Nope.
Breaking a trend. Well, once happens, two's a trend, a coincidence, 3 would be a trend. So you're not going to do that. Got it.
It's handy to be 3. It's a good balance. You know, there's enough, especially because we put rules in so that when you check in, if you're the one who checks in a PR or whatever, you can't also merge it. And we have gotten ourselves in a problem so many times where accidentally the pattern for how we merged the PR and whoever did the merge and whoever needs to do the next merge, we got ourselves in a locked circle where 2 people aren't enough. So we need that third person in case we've accidentally get ourselves in that. So now it's like, okay, and we're literally on the phone together. I'm like, okay, I checked it in, Patrick, only merge. And then he's like, okay, I hit the button. And I'm like, okay, now I'm going to do the next step. Only hit approve.
So there's like a Git rule that you've got set up that just kind of blocks you from doing it?
Yeah, we've got a Git security rule. I'm sorry, I sort of misspoke about it. It's that you have to approve PRs. So if you approve the PR and then merge, then if I do another one, you can't be the person who approves and merges because you merged the last one. So you can't approve that one. So you end up in this locked circle where I'm like, but I have to do the PR because I have it. But you already merged the previous one, so now you can't approve this one. So then we need another person in the loop to approve so we can. So it's always, if you approve, do not merge.
Got it.
Anyway.
Cool. Okay. So that's what your involvement is, but
yes.
What is it?
So essentially, it is a Fluent library for accessing SharePoint REST APIs and the Microsoft Graph APIs as in a general sense. Those are those 2 API surfaces are the ones where we pre-build all of the endpoints that you could access on any of those RESTful endpoints. So in practice, what is a Fluent library? A Fluent library is essentially IntelliSense. So when you're in your coding surface and you need to build a URL for a REST endpoint, it helps you by giving you IntelliSense of how to chain together the different objects that make up that URL string with the IntelliSense of what could be the next thing in your list, and helps you make decisions about, oh, well, if I have a web, then I might want a list. And if I have a list, then I might want an item. And if I have an item, I might want a column, whatever it might be. So there's lots of ways to sort of traverse RESTful endpoints, especially large surfaces of RESTful endpoints like the Microsoft Graph. And where Graph is particularly tricky is that it merges and converges in and out of things. And so that makes it mentally hard to put together the string concatenation that you might need to make a RESTful call.
Is it like the number of permutations that you could go through on
exactly.
different calls? It's mind-boggling. There's so many that you can't. It makes it simpler to go through. You don't have to sit there and check in the docs. Like, okay, I got to a user object. Now, what can I go from the user object? Okay, I got to a meeting object. How do I go to the next thing? Or how do I got to a list? How do I get? What's the next piece?
Exactly. That's exactly the premise of a Fluent library.
Okay. And because it's got JS in the name, it means it's for C#.
Yes. No, it's TypeScript / JavaScript library. So it's all typed, so it's all built in TypeScript, has all its typings. Obviously, you can use it in JavaScript. You don't need the typings if you're doing JavaScript, obviously. So it is for any project that is based on JavaScript or TypeScript. So that could be it could be a Node.js application, that could be in the browser, that could be inside of SharePoint Framework, inside of the Teams Toolkit, any of those places, and including some stuff in the Power Platform, actually. So,
okay, that's interesting. I know you could use it in Power Platform.
Well, if you're doing the JavaScript thing that you can now do with Power Platform, obviously you could do it there.
That's a whole other discussion about why you would do that.
It is
but that's
a much different
Yeah.
discussion.
Let's keep it positive. So, okay. So then one question that I hear, one of the reasons I want to ask you about this is I'm not a prolific user of PnPjs only because I generally try not to use SDKs that are not, I teach primarily. And so in teaching about how to do stuff with like the SharePoint Framework, how to do stuff with Microsoft Graph or Teams, I try just to use the SDKs that Microsoft gives us at a bare minimum, just so that people don't feel like, okay, here's an open source thing you got to use. A company's like, well, our company can't use that. So,
yep.
So,
I mean, I would point out that the library is only a development IDE. It doesn't do anything particularly from the production perspective. All it's essentially doing is building the string for you, and then issuing that call using the context that you provide. So yes, lots of people can't use it because it's a third open source library, but you're
not doing anything different.
You're not doing anything different. We're a pass-through to the REST endpoints. So it's one of the common misconceptions that are like, well, it's broken in PnPjs. And then you ask the question like, well, check the network call. And they're like, oh, well, the network call is broken. And it's like, then it's not PnPjs. It's your call, right? Like that call doesn't work, or whatever you did with that call doesn't work.
Right. So, okay. So then that brings up a good point then. So you talked about, you talked early on, like what different endpoints you can talk to, what REST APIs. So you said SharePoint REST API and Microsoft Graph. Is it limited to those two, or is it that just like,
It isn't. It isn't.
Okay.
Not at all. And that is because of the work we did with V3. So in V3, the guts of the PnPjs library got completely changed to a pattern that Patrick he dreamt it up, and he implemented the guts of it, and he called it timeline. And basically the timeline is, think of it like eventing. So it's eventing in the different stages of what a RESTful fetch might be. So you would have a step that's before you make the call, and you'd have an auth step to build the header, and then you'd have a send step that makes the fetch call, and then you get the response back, and that's a step, and then you need to parse that response, so you need to convert it to JSON and then parse it potentially, and then you have the data that you send back to the user. So that's what is considered a timeline. And we built something then on top of that we call queryable. And so a queryable is just a concatenation of a timeline that has a particular URL base to it. And so essentially you can say, I want to use this queryable that has all of these, what we call behaviors, bolted onto them. The behaviors are how each step in that timeline can get augmented or changed. So we have like a behavior that we call SPFx. The SPFx behavior is a group of behaviors. Inside of that is header augmentation, auth augmentation, parsers, all of those types of things. So the behaviors get bolted into the timeline, and that combination of thing is called a queryable. And essentially you can then say, okay, I want to go get webs. And it goes, oh, okay, I know that I need to have an auth header with the bearer token on it. I know I need to parse the response as JSON. I know, and then I know I want to return that to the user. So you can bolt on, customize that queryable any way you want to with any number of behaviors where we have some built in, like the SharePoint Framework one. And this is sort of what I was saying. You mentioned context. Well, when we do SharePoint Framework, we have a context in the initial.
Before we go there,
yeah, I know I'm going too far.
Yeah. I want to do like, I want to try and like go through like the what, the why, when, and then we'll go through the how and like how I start using it. So get more of the context done.
This is why you're in charge, because I'm just going to go down the rabbit hole. Pull me back, Andrew. Pull me back.
And Julie didn't think that we had a whole lot to talk about. Right. So anyway, here we go. We say that a lot though. That's a trend. Okay. So if, again, sticking with the what, so you talked about REST call, the basis is basically a wrapper to calling different REST endpoints. Specifically,
your question originally was where else could it be used? It could be used in any RESTful endpoint anywhere. We have it built up to use for the Graph and SharePoint REST APIs, but you can just use the core of PnPjs and you could build it for your custom REST API if you wanted to. I know that Bo did a whole thing on using MCP servers for some AI stuff he was doing. He used the core of it to build a whole interface for his MCP server so that he could make that library so other people could consume it.
Interesting.
So it's extensible in crazy ways.
So if I've been like doing stuff with the SharePoint framework, or if I'm used to working with Microsoft Graph, if I'm doing something today, what does this replace? What does PnPjs replace or work in lieu of that I'm used to working with, like in the SharePoint framework?
Yeah, you would either you have the SharePoint HTTP endpoint and you have the Graph HTTP endpoint for making your calls, for your fetch calls.
You mean the clients, like the SPHP client and MS Graph client v3?
Yep. Yeah, it's been so long since I actually used those. I don't even know the names of them.
That's okay.
Like ever.
Yeah.
Never used them.
So you wouldn't use the stuff that we get the native that's in SharePoint framework for doing HTTP calls. You would use this and you could use this instead.
You use this instead.
All right.
Although it uses those under the covers.
Okay. So we'll talk about how would I use it if I'm familiar with using like the SharePoint client or the SPHTTP client or the MS Graph v3 client. If I'm used to using those, we'll talk about how I can do that in like a SharePoint framework project, or if I had a Node.js based project, how to do that. So we'll come back to that in a bit.
Yeah. I think one other point I should have made since we're on the what is sort of this idea, it's really widely used and it's almost shockingly widely used. So just to level set, the last time we have metrics. The last time we even looked at metrics was over a year ago. We have 38,000 tenants that use the library, and we're generating somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 billion calls a month with the library.
Moly. Okay. So
and not only that, Satya Nadella's dashboard built with PnPjs.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's pretty cool. That's a good claim to fame.
So yeah, that was pretty cool. Like
no pressure. Get his attention. Yeah, that's how you can get his attention. Just ship a bug.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway, okay. So that wraps up a bit of a what for me. You have anything else you want to add to the what?
I think I got the what now.
I think we've already got the next. I think we've answered the next two things, but we're going to go through it just because.
Yeah, the why.
Just to make sure somebody jumps around the episode. Yep. So why would I use it in lieu of one of the other options? In lieu of using the MS Graph client or the SPHP client that I have in the SharePoint framework, or if I'm doing just a pure JavaScript thing, I'm not using the MS Graph client from the Graph team, the Graph JavaScript SDK from the Graph team.
Yeah, I mean, there's some pros and cons. The Graph SDK has some similarities in the sense that it does have some Fluent API type of aspect to it, but it's still clunky. I don't like the way it does auth, and the thing that I don't like the most is the size of it. So when you take a dependency on that library, it bloats the absolute heck out of your project. It makes it ginormous. I don't want to, whatever. It's what it is. they would tell you that they would want you to go through and build a special build of the SDK based on the endpoints you're going to call to minimize the size of the library so that your package doesn't get bloated as much because you're not going to include the whole library. We solved that with PnPjs by using selective imports. So, if you only import webs, you take a dependency of something like 19K or some silly small number.
You didn't say it this exact, but let me see if I can understand this. So your PnPjs sounds like it supports tree shaking. So
it does.
So if I'm using a tool like Webpack or Vite or Rollup or whatever, I guess if I'm using Vite, I'm using Rollup. But if I'm using like Webpack to go through and to build my project, and I'm importing, I have an import statement that's pulling from PnPjs. Part of that process that happens is it does a tree shaking at the end. For those who aren't familiar, it basically think like a tree in the fall season where you've got leaves that are like dying out on the limb because the seasons are changing. And if you walk up to the tree, it's like if it's a manageable sized trunk, and you shake the tree, all the dead leaves fall off. It's basically all the code that is not being touched by your app in some either directly or in a transitive way. All that code just falls out of the bundle. It's not included. So it sounds like what you're saying is the JavaScript SDK from Microsoft Graph, they don't support tree shaking. Instead, they say you go through and you remove what you don't need in your own build to basically get the same thing. But you've got to go through and you've got to do it your own. You got to do it your own way. You got to be a tree surgeon.
Yes.
Oh my God, I didn't realize that.
That's the directive we've gotten.
That doesn't. Okay, so that's great. So
the main why is that just using a Fluent library versus doing string concatenation makes your development time just boatloads faster, right? We even I'm going to get this wrong, but there's and I think it was you who shared it, a MCP server for docs.
Context
Do you
7.
remember that one? We added PnPjs to that. So
I saw that.
I mean, from that perspective, I think if you're trying to use AI to help you along, and you've got this from the Fluent perspective, I've got to think that's going to make your development time significantly faster. It certainly lessens the code that you need because if you remember what I was saying before about how timeline works, if you do a regular fetch, right? Like if you just do a browser-based fetch call and you're get and you pass it the URL or whatever, the response you're going to get back, you've got to put in your bearer token and you got to do all that. The response you get back, if it works, because there's a different path, but let's say it works and you get, a 200 type response, you now have to do another awaited call to parse it, right? And the beauty of the library is that it does all of that for you, right? So you're just basically awaiting the call, and the result of the call is the already parsed result. So if it's an array of items or if it's a single item or whatever, it's already parsed into JSON. So that makes things a lot cleaner, clearer, and faster.
So, okay, so let me ask you a couple of things with this then, going on what you just talked, some of the things you just mentioned. So let me go in reverse order. So you just talked about not having to go through and concatenate the entire URL. So if I'm talking to the SharePoint REST API, as far as I'm aware, I know the SharePoint Framework, the SPHP client does not do this, where you do have to go through and build the entire URL to the endpoint that you want to get down to. The Graph client is the same Graph client that we get if I'm just doing a vanilla project that is not SharePoint Framework and I'm using the Graph client. What the SharePoint Framework does is that they have the Graph JavaScript SDK that I could go use outside the SharePoint Framework that we just talked about a second ago. But what the SharePoint Framework does is it includes it in the SharePoint Framework API but they just do the automatic authentication configuration stuff to it. So I'm still getting with Graph, I'm still getting that Fluent UI. I'm not going to have the bloat because that library is loaded in the browser. It's not going to be part of my bundle, but Correct. It is going to be part of the bundle that I generate, or at least something I've got to deal with in the rendering of my app or the loading of my app and the modules. If I'm doing it outside the SharePoint framework, because I do need to load the graph JavaScript client on the page. In the SharePoint framework, it's unavoidable. It's always going to be there, even if I'm not even using it. Okay. Well, that's awesome. Those are good reasons why you'd want to use it. This is giving you a Fluent UI where you don't have one for the SharePoint REST API. This is giving you that Fluent UI if people want to use that. And it's also giving you like you said, the automatic parsing of the results to come back, which is something we always end up doing, with the exception of like a delete or an update. That's something we're always doing, or create, I guess. We're always doing it.
Yeah, and we've tried to make an effort to do things like if it's like a photo image or something like that, we're implementing the behaviors that are needed to parse those results when they're not JSON responses, right?
So a binary stream or something like that comes back.
Exactly. So we do a lot of that work for you inside of the library. And if we don't do it exactly the way you want to, the beauty here is you can just take the queryable and we expose all of our fetch clients that are built on timeline. So we have a SP get, SP post, SP patch, SP delete, graph get, graph, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can take the queryable. And so the queryable is the thing before you execute it. So if I say, like I want a SharePoint web, that's a queryable. And if I don't execute it by, awaiting it, right, that's a queryable. And I can say, SP get, and I can put the variable that is the queryable, comma, and then whatever endpoint I want to hit and add usings with other behaviors to modify headers to do whatever I might need to do. So for instance, when I'm reverse engineering tenant-based APIs that I want to use, even though they're theoretically not supported by the first party, supported as a third-party endpoint, but I want to use them anyway. That's a different discussion that we could have. I can just do that. I can just, because the same bearer token is going to work. I can just reset my query or my queryable to the root URL that I want it to use and say, go SP get this, and it'll put the right bearer token on, and it'll parse the results, and it'll do all the things.
That's
so
cool.
I can call any endpoint I want to, whether or not we as the PnPjs team and or contributors from the outside, because it's open source, so we do take contributions. If somebody wants to, we don't have full coverage of everything in the graph. We're working on it slowly but surely. We've got all the key ones, like all the ones that 99.999% of people would want to use. But, new things are coming out. We don't have coverage for absolutely everything. We try to add it as we can. But if there's one that you're like, oh, they don't have this one, but I can see that that's a URL, take the queryable as the base of whatever you can get to, and then just append that thing on and make the call anyway. I do it all the time. I'm like, ooh, we didn't do that one. Oh, well, I'll do it here. And then I go into the PnPjs library, I implement it for everyone else and submit it as a PR.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Okay. That's okay. Oh my gosh, I have questions. All right. So I'm writing my own questions down for a future episode. All right. So anything else why you would want to add on to the why?
No, I think we got the why.
Okay. So the next one is, I think it makes sense to combine both of these because it's not like you're not going anywhere, but when and where would I use this? So you've already covered this a little bit. So if I'm in a client-side solution, it's a JavaScript library. So anything that's JavaScript based, including TypeScript, I could use this in client-side solution like SharePoint Framework. I could use it in like the client-side part of a Teams app. Could I use it in an app that is neither one of those? Like I just built like a standard like website that I have to do like intro authentication and then say, hey, I want to use PnPjs to talk to SharePoint Online.
We have an MCell library extension that's a wrapper to make a behavior for the MCell library. So party on, whatever you can do with MCell as far as auth, you can just bolt them together. So
I could use delegated permissions or app only permissions.
Mm-hmm.
Does it also do like managed identity? If that was
it does.
Of course it does because you're involved.
Managed identity. Azure Identity wrapper got made. Yep.
I started to ask that question, and I'm like, oh, I'm absolutely going to ask this, but I know what the answer is going to be because she's involved in it, and she likes that managed identity as much as I do.
I love managed identity.
Okay.
So, ergo, you're moving into the Azure function world, right? And this This is now you're stepping into exactly why I write .NET. I started my career writing, I started my career writing machine code and assembler, but my professional career was Visual Studio, not Visual Studio, Jesus Christ, Visual Basic, excuse me. But once I got into C# library, I was writing .NET for everything. I did ASP.NET and all that stuff. But once I started writing SharePoint Framework and client-side solutions, that constant, as a full stack developer, that constant context switching between writing TypeScript, JavaScript / HTML, CSS, and then writing also the APIs, the back end, and trying to switch context between .NET, C# and TypeScript, I finally cried uncle. It's not that you can't do it, but if I'm simultaneously developing both, which I do a lot, like I'm writing a custom SharePoint Framework solution and I'm going to build my own custom API. If I literally have Visual Studio Code open and Visual Studio open, and I'm writing both languages at the same time, my brain wants to just kill me. I'm like, I have to stop. It's not, if I were just writing .NET and I had a whole project and that's all I was going to do, and then I have a whole new project and I'm going to write TypeScript, that would have been okay. It was that I was writing both at the same time. And I was like, I can't do this. And in .NET, there are PnP libraries that help you do REST calls to the graph and SharePoint, but they work very differently.
Yeah.
And so this sort of idea that I could write the front end and the back end with one library to do all my RESTful calls was like chef's kiss. That's what I want.
I'm right there with you. I mean, yes, you could, anybody can say like, yeah, but you're doing JavaScript so it's slower than .NET. I'm like, yeah, I totally agree with you. It is. But guess what?
Yeah. Doesn't matter.
None of this stuff, like in terms of a scale thing, I'm not as concerned about something. If it was an issue, then yeah, I'd do it in a compiled code or not an interpreted language.
100%.
But other than that, it's more about my developer productivity and being able to ship stuff and not having to do task switching between two different languages or tool sets and build tool chains and testing sets, testing tools. I mean, it's just life is easier this way.
Bottleneck is the time it takes for the response in anything that I've ever done. For this platform. Yeah. We're not building apps for speed against like SQL Server. That would be a different conversation entirely.
Right. And so you're going through like another layer, and having to go through that other layers is already going to have an impact on us. Okay, so I could use it server side Node.js. Mm-hmm. So that would be Azure Functions. That would be server side Node.js web server if I'm running a
web
local.
Server. Yep, exactly.
And then client side SharePoint Framework. So basically, wherever JavaScript is, I'm good.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I knew the when and the where was going to be kind of quick, so that's good. Mark that guy off. Oh, interesting. I just realized I just learned a new. I thought I was in a different app to mark off my test list. I wasn't. I was in a different app, and I just actually learned how to do a screen. Apparently, when you strike through something in Notion, that is the exact same keyboard command in a extension I have in Chrome that takes a screenshot of the current screen. That's nice and puts it on the clipboard. Yeah. Okay. So, and the reason I said it out loud was that I actually made a note to myself in the transcript to do that. All right. So now let me ask you a little bit about the how. So if I want to get started with this, I'm assuming the install, npm.js is an npm package?
PnP/SP, yes. Yep. Okay. And at PnP graph. It's actually one of the sort of misnomers. And a lot of times when I'm helping people debug their situation, I'll notice that they've imported more packages than they need to. The only two packages you need to start with are the add.pnp SP package if you're going to make calls against the SharePoint REST APIs, and the add.pnp graph library if you want to have the Fluent API towards the Microsoft Graph endpoints. Other than that, if you're in SharePoint Framework, you're done. If you're in a browser-based solution that has nothing to do with being inside of Microsoft 365, you might need the msal.js client. That's a little wrapper that we provide. And if you're writing in Node.js, you would have to import separately a Node.js wrapper that does a few things because Node behaves slightly different than a browser. After that, the rest is, there's a few other optional packages when you're doing something very special, but you don't really need anything more than that, right? And so if you're importing core or queryable, you don't need to be doing it. It's a dependency. You don't need to import them separately. And if you've got different version numbers on any of these things, you've created a bad situation for yourself, and you need to make them all the same version number. So don't try to import different versions of the @PnPjs packages, always the same version. We see that a lot.
I mean, I guess I was going to say that makes sense, but if other people are doing that, then it doesn't make sense to everybody. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, I see it constantly. So it just felt like something that we should really bring up. From a getting started perspective, we have three actually, getting started projects, right? In the root of our documentation, there's a getting started page where actually Bo has been pointing Claude at our getting started docs, and Claude's like kind of going nuts. So we're going to have better, V5 is going to have some really good getting started, improved getting started docs. But I would say it's not terrible today. If you go to the getting started page, essentially there's 3 sample projects. There's like a whole basic like written out statement on getting started, but there's 3 sample projects. There's a SharePoint Framework with React components project. Then Bo took that same project and made a React hooks version, because that is a big deal. One of the things that I think that people are transitioning from React components to React hooks don't fully understand is how to manage the SharePoint object and how to deal with the hooks for the SharePoint root object or the graph object that is the root queryable. So where's he doing highly misunderstood. Huh?
Where's he doing that? Is that are those here in your docs?
Yeah, in the getting started, there's 2 versions if you're reading through the docs.
Yeah,
there's a third one, a final one, that is getting started in an Azure function, and it shows you how to do it in Node.js. That also includes a sample of my preferred pattern, which is a service type pattern. I use the service type pattern in all of my projects, but I gave a sample in the getting started Azure Functions one.
Okay, I must be missing something because I don't see the one about React hooks. I was curious to see what you guys were doing there. I'm on the getting started page. I was just looking, but okay. So to be able to use it, let's say I'm in the SharePoint framework. All right, start there. What am I looking at? Like when I want to go make a call to get all of the lists in the current site that I'm in, like I'm doing it. I got my import statement on there, but like, first you have to establish context. That's the very first thing. So the one thing I will say, if you're on the getting started page of the docs and you're in the V4 docs, hopefully you're there. Essentially the third one down says getting started with SharePoint Framework, and then it has quick references. V3 and V4 are the same for getting started. There's a code sample SharePoint Framework 1.19.0 with PnPjs version 4, then code sample SharePoint Framework 1.15.2 with PnPjs version 3 using React hooks, and then getting started with PnPjs 3.0, the 5-part series that Patrick and I did a while back. And then further down on the Azure one is the Azure Functions sample all the way at the bottom of the page. So I just wanted to answer your question so that people knew they were there. Okay. So then from a getting started perspective, the first thing you need to do is what we call establishing context. And so if you remember me back at the beginning, I said we have to establish context, and there is a queryable that we have to create. And the queryable is an instance of timeline with the behaviors bolted onto it that allow all of the things to do the things that they need to do, like know how to add auth, know how to parse the response, etc. So when we establish context, we create the functional interface for one of the 2 libraries, depending on which one you're using. And you can use both at the same time. That's what FI is. It's the functional interface. Okay,
so the SPFi, SharePoint Functional Interface, Graph FI is the Graph Functional Interface, and that's the place to start. So when you're in SP, you usually just say, I want SPFi, which is lowercase, the type is uppercase, and then you just do open close parentheses, and then dot using, and the using function is how, or method, excuse me, is how you bring in a behavior. So I want to use a behavior. The behavior in this case is the SPFx behavior. Now, Patrick and I had a huge go around about this, and he makes a lot of fun of me about it because I think it's a pain in the butt, because I often use the SharePoint REST endpoints and the graph endpoints in the same project. But the behavior is called SPFx for both libraries. So if you are creating both functional interfaces, you have to rename the type import. So you'd be like import SPFx as SPFx from the SharePoint package, and import SPFx as graph SPFx from the graph library or module. And then you essentially say using SPFx, and that gets past the this.context if you're in SharePoint Framework.
I see. So the behavior is where I'm calling from, not what I'm trying. So, or the environment that I'm running within.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I got it. So,
and then there's a behavior for MS browser. So if you're in a browser, and then that expects an MCell object to tell it how you want to auth. And if you're in Node.js, I'm expecting an Azure Identity object.
Got it. Okay. So you're using the common objects too that are already there for you. So it's not like there's something that this is so unique kind of a thing that you're having to buy into to get your own identity stuff.
So,
it's like,
no,
you're going to authenticate with themselves, so
identity.
use Azure Identity. So you're going to use the same kind of setup that it does, trying to figure out who you are.
Exactly. And it's gonna just be one line of code essentially to establish that context and be like, here I go. Let me create the factory interface. Let me bolt on all the behaviors that I know I want to use. And so you can use our pre-built ones. The SPFX ones are behaviors of behaviors, right? A collection. It's a behavior that is a collection of behaviors. But you could build your own behaviors that are behave slightly differently and bolt them together one after another. You can do .using, and bolt them together however you want to. And pull together your own, like if you want to use a different fetch client, or you have like a proxy, or you have whatever special thing, have at it.
That's pretty cool. All right. Well, that's not too hard to get into. I mean, we went through, let's see, what do we do here? We got the what, we got the why, we got the when and where, we got the how do you get started? Once you do that, once you have that
Context.
Once you have that context set up, so I've got my SP object that I've already used, the SharePoint factory interface. I've used the SharePoint Framework behavior. I passed in the SharePoint Framework context. That now turns around and gives me back my PnPjs SP context. And now I just do SP dot, and it's a Fluent UI back to the REST API.
Right. And it depends on what you've imported. That works 80 to 90% of the time. Visual Studio Code will understand if it like you do dot and it's not there, it's because you didn't import it. Now, there are times when you paste it in and it might not red squiggle, and then it's going to fail during build, right?
Oh.
So
it just hasn't cached it. It hasn't like
you know how flaky those imports can be in Visual Studio Code. So that's all it really is. But essentially, if it ever gets through build, you're going to know you have a problem, because it'll be like, I don't know what web is. And you're like, how do you not? Oh, I didn't import it.
I like the way that something you said earlier too, that as I see this from some of my students, where they'll post a question saying like, hey, having this trouble, not getting the data back from SharePoint REST API. And like, here's my code. And they show the PnP code. And I'm like, or PnPjs code. And I'm like, no. Show me the stack. Show me like the networks tab. I want to see what was on the network tab. Show me the request. And show me the responses you're getting back. And they're like, no, here's my code. And I'm like, I don't care about what an SDK is doing. It's like, ultimately, I want to see if it's a problem with the SDK, then it's a problem with the HTTP call that they're making, or that is making. But if the call that you're seeing, if that's a legitimate call and it's failing, then it's like, well, you're either doing something you're not supposed to be doing, or it's a dependency. It's a service issue that we don't have control over.
Yeah. And I would say probably 60 to 70% of the time, that's the problem. Like, and the other percentage of the time is somebody just not putting something together quite right. I mean, it can be tricky sometimes, especially if you're trying to, bend it a little bit further than, the vanilla stuff. I can get myself wrapped around an axle when I need to do something funky. Like, is this going to work? Can I make this? I mean, you can really bend this thing to your will. It's pretty crazy how flexible it is inside. I mean, Patrick's a friggin' genius. Like, if you feel like it and go check out the internals of PnP Core, it's like, okay, this is amazing. And if you ask Bo, and I'm sure I remember when he joined, because I was there for that rewriting of timeline, and it still was like months as I tried to wrap my brain around the complexities of how it worked. And then Bo joined and he's like, this is magic stuff. And I'm like, it is. And he's like, it just takes so long to wrap your head around how timeline works. But once you get it, you're like, I
powerful.
can do so much stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's cool. Very cool. Yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to part with anybody before we move on? I mean, we covered. I think we've done the five W's and the H.
Yeah, I think we covered all the getting started for sure. I just wanted to say out loud, and we'll have a link in the show notes, that Bo and I are going to be at the Microsoft 365 Community Conference, and we only have 45 minutes, but we're going to do a getting started with PnPjs. We've done it 4 years in a row now, so this is our fourth year. It's usually really well attended. We have a little less time, and I think we might cut things back and give tips. Spend a little more time doing tips and tricks and shrink out the getting started a little bit to just make it interesting for those who have maybe seen the getting started part before. We're gonna give some really interesting little tidbits on bending the library to your will, I would say. So
I hope that session. I hope that's and we'll put a link to the conference where you can get a discount code in there, I think, as well. And I hope that I hope my session is not competing with yours, because I'm also doing a tips and tricks on the SharePoint framework. So it would be nice if these were almost like back to back.
Yeah, that would be good. I have no idea though.
45 minutes is just not enough, but all right.
Yeah.
Anyway,
don't get me started on that subject.
Exactly. Different topic. Mm-hmm. Okay. Julie, first of all, thank you very much for the detailed the detailed answers and the walkthrough on this. I learned a lot. It's a lot more approachable than I thought it was beforehand. So it's been very helpful. I hope for the listener, I hope it was also very helpful for you. And I would hope that if you have any questions about this, or you want to dive deeper onto any of it, like how do I customize it, or different scenarios, or more stuff about what she was talking about with the React hooks and stuff, let me know. I'd love to, or let us know. Drop a comment in any of our socials where you see the episode being published. Leave a comment on the Code Deploy Go Live LinkedIn page and those posts, and ask a question about PnPjs so that we can dive into a future episode.
Yeah, if we get a lot of good questions or whatever, we'll consolidate them together and try to make another episode that sort of does answer a bunch of those questions. And hopefully I can wrangle some other members of my crew in to join us. That would be fun.
I think I need to interview you guys put you on the flip side and interview you guys at the Orlando conference, M365 community conference, right after your session, and go all right, these tips and tricks you're talking about, let's put it on the show.
Yeah. I think that would be fun.
All right.
Awesome.
How would you like to do a pick this time, Julie?
You can go first if you want, or I can go first, whatever.
No. I'm the host. I interviewed you, and I'm asking you, what is your pick or picks for us today?
So my pick is this is a little weird. I have been trying to, as an American, some of us have been trying to reduce our dependency on the big tech organizations that are maybe using our money in ways we wouldn't want to. And I follow that a little bit. I do it where it makes sense, and where it doesn't make sense, I don't do it. But I had read about a music streaming service called Qbuzz, Qobuz. It's Qobuz, and so I don't know how to pronounce it or whatever. But I was intrigued by it. And I was like, oh, I wonder what this is about. And I researched a little bit, and they had like a cool, like, oh, you could try it, for a month. And then they had a converter. So you could put in your Spotify account or other music streaming service accounts, and it would convert all of your playlists and all your favorite songs and all of that stuff over to this other service. And I'm like, I just want to see what it's like. And it found all my music, everything except for some specialty Spotify stuff I had pinned, but everything that I had in there, it found a match to. So I was pretty happy about that. And I had a really long drive on Monday, and I was like, oh, let me just start listening to it. And I got in my car, and I have a fairly nice car and a really good sound system. And I've been sort of like unimpressed. Like when I first played some stuff, it was really good. And then I'm like, God, music doesn't sound good in this car anymore. What is going on? And I use Spotify to play my music. And I started listening to this service instead, my normal playlist that I listen to when I'm traveling, called Traveling. And I was like, wow, this song sounds amazing. What is going on? And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, and then I had stopped, and I was listening to a particular song, and I'm like, I'm going to go to Spotify and play the same song. And I was like, oh, and I'm like, play a little bit, and I'll like play a little in this song, and play a little, and play a little. And then I tried 2 other songs, and I'm like, play it. And I'm like, oh my God, the quality is so much better. And I double checked because I was like, maybe I've got an EQ on because Spotify does have like special EQs you can put on. So I turned the EQ completely off. I tried a couple of different EQ settings. Not anywhere near it.
Huh.
This was better significantly. So the thing I will say, the feature my husband likes about Spotify is that he'll just put a song in, and then it will sort of the Pandora version of like use AI or whatever to sort of figure out what other songs. And he uses that as a discovery mechanism. So he'll be like, I'm listening to jazz today. And then it'll just pull in other songs, and he will discover new music by that method. They do not have that feature in here. The other thing that I liked about this service that kind of felt good to me is the amount they pay the artist per play is like 100x what Spotify does.
What? Like, holy crap.
I think 100. 0.01 versus 0.0001 for Spotify. And I was like, so somebody should double check those numbers because maybe I, didn't have my glasses on or whatever, but I'm pretty sure that's what I read. And I was like, wow, okay. I mean, not for nothing. That's a thing. So I'll double check. We'll check those numbers, and because I could be misquoting. It could be 10x, but it was definitely at least 1 decimal, if not 2 more per play. And I was like, yeah. So at any rate,
good find.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to convince my husband to give up Spotify. And then I also would have to convert my son. So we'll see what happens, but I really love it, and I kind of want to stay with it. So we'll see. It sounds so much better in my car. I was like, oh, this is what the music is supposed to sound like. Anyway.
Our family is a Apple, I guess, one premium subscriber. So we Apple Music and all the other stuff. Maybe it's the equivalent of Apple Music. So I don't know. Maybe this is just a Spotify thing. So be interesting if you do decide to try it. I'd love to hear. There is an option. Well, I'm not. I'll have to tell you what everybody else says because I've got tinnitus real bad. So like I can't tell the difference. I had to have people on YouTube tell me that I had like this chirping sound in my videos for a couple of weeks or months on the YouTube channel. I was like, I can't hear it. My daughter and my wife are like going, I can totally hear it. I'm like, would you come to the office and would you tell me where you can hear it and show you a waveform? Because I can't hear it. I need to see it so I can do something about it because I don't know how to test it and to change something. Because he's like, did I fix it? I don't know if I fixed it. So I was able to finally see it one day. But at any rate, okay. That's a good pick. It is a common mispronunciation is Q-buzz. The phonetic breakdown, the correct pronunciation is co-buzz. It is derived from another word, which I'm not going to try and say that one because I'm going to mess that one up. It is which is an ancient Central Asian stringed instrument.
Kobus.
So K-O-H. buzz. So Cobuzz. Yeah.
Now I have to listen back to the recording to see what I said originally.
Qbuzz.
Did I say Qbuzz?
Yeah. So that's why, as I said that way. But back to your point about like the Apple Music and Spotify. I don't know if Spotify does this. I don't use Spotify. Apple Music has an option where you could say I want like the high res of the music or the lower res. So okay.
Yep, it has a setting and I have it set to the highest quality that I can get.
Okay.
Which should be CD quality, but the tracks that I listen to on Qobuz say CD quality, and some of them are high res, like say high res, but the ones that I was comparing with said CD quality. So theoretically, since I had already downloaded the music, so it wasn't downgrading my listening experience, I had downloaded the songs that we're talking about onto my phone through Spotify. So theoretically, it should have been the highest quality. I don't know. Okay. That was my experience on Monday, and I was like, wow, I love this. So
there you go.
Anyway.
Cool. All right. I have two.
What's your pick?
I'll be a little quick on them. So one of them, I'm going to follow like the big trend that's going on right now, and I'm going to talk about Claude-bot or Molt-bot, or now it's called OpenClaw. Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay. So essentially what it is, the quick and dirty of it is, this guy built this thing. It's called Claude-bot, as in a crustacean, a shellfish with a claw. And you would basically set it up on a dedicated device, or you could, like on a lot of people were using Apple Minis for it, or you could do it on some like probably a Docker container. And it's essentially a always running AI chatbot that is kind of running automated tasks at night. So you wake up and you can say like, oh, look, I've got my summary sheet of here's the news. Here's a bunch of research it did for the people that I'm talking to about XYZ. Here's the here's like a summary of like my Aura ring. I don't have one of those, but just all this stuff, like just does a bunch of stuff on your behalf. And then Anthropic got pissed and said, yeah, sounds too much like Claude. Change the name. So he changed the name to Molt-bot, as in a crustacean, getting rid of a shell.
Yeah.
And then it's now been renamed yet again to OpenClaw. And I got an article here, and there's a lot of security questions about this thing. And of course, Wiz.io does a pretty good job of this. And they came up and they were like, here's how you can hack this thing. We exposed one database, got 35,000 emails, 1.5 million API keys, and 17,000 humans behind the not so autonomous AI network. And it's a really interesting article. It kind of goes through this. I would people who have set this thing up, I look at it and go, this looks like a security nightmare that I would never give AI like the keys to the kingdom. And I'm scrolling through this and I saw one quote by the guy who wrote it on that he posted on Twitter. And it just kind of explained a lot to me.
Code it.
He said, quote, I didn't write a single line of code for Molt-bot. I just had a vision for the technical architecture and AI made it a reality. I'm like, and there's a security issue with it. You don't say, bro.
Oh my barking God. Of course. Oh, yeah. Of course.
So anyway, I got an article here that's just going to show you how to hack this. I'm in a community where someone like hooked it up to their Instagram DMs and also had it hooked up to their email. And then they came back and they're like, don't do what I did, because somebody figured out I made a comment on social that I had done this and this thing was awesome. And then all of a sudden I started getting these DMs on Instagram, and they were able to essentially do like prompt engineering where they were sending a DM to me on Instagram that I wasn't responding to, but Molt-bot was getting it. And it was causing me, I looked back at it and they were essentially doing searches for any emails that I received for transactions, notifications from Bank of America, from Chase, from JP Morgan, from Stripe, from PayPal, from QuickBooks. Oh, look, it found your Stripe one, and it did a complete dump of like all their transactions. It went from there and started going a whole bunch of transactions.
This isn't you. This is somebody.
No. Somebody in my community shared
you
the story.
And
I was
like,
did, that's exactly why I don't do that. I was speaking on her behalf.
Yeah.
Of like, don't do what I did.
I was like,
oh my God. It's just, I don't know. Anyway, so I give you that one.
That's
the other
fantastic.
one that I had was a research article by Anthropic that they released last week.
Yeah. Yep.
And this is similar to the one that MIT did earlier, I think in 2024 at some point. And essentially what they did was the title of the article. There's a deeper paper, like academic paper, research paper that they published. The blog post that I'm going to link to is a good summary of it for the lay person. If you want the real meat and potatoes, go read the academic paper. I tuned out pretty quick because I was like, okay, this is a little deep. Give me the cliff notes.
TLDR.
So Anthropic, the title of their article is How AI Assistance Impacts the Formation of Coding Skills. And it's a really good, I really like the way that they did their study and how they and the conclusions they came to. And it triggered me to kind of be a little more self-introspective of like how I'm using AI and how I'm not using it. And I know we were in a call this morning, you and I were in a call this morning, and the topic I think that I came across is like, AI is doing all my coding and stuff for me. I'm like, no, that's not how I'm using it. In some things I am, but in other things I'm not. I thought this was really good about how I'll read this one little quote from them. It's not a quote, it's 3 paragraphs. So I'll read it really quick and then kind of give you a little bit of like what people go take a look at. So they said, starting the quote. So quote, in a randomized controlled trial, we examined 1, how quickly software developers picked up a new skill, in this case, a Python library, with and without AI assistance, and 2, whether using AI made them less likely to understand the code that they just wrote. We found that using AI assistance led to a statistically significant decrease in mastery. On a quiz that covered concepts that they used just a few minutes before, participants in the AI group scored 70% lower than those who coded by hand, or the equivalent of nearly 2 letter grades. AI sped the task up slightly, but it didn't reach the threshold of statistical significance. Later, they explained why they think that is. And it was more that people spent more time having a conversation. And so they were still saying the same amount of time getting it done, but they were having a conversation with AI what they wanted to get done. So continuing with the quote, importantly, using AI assistance didn't guarantee a lower score, but how someone used the AI influenced how much information they retained. The participants who showed stronger mastery used AI assistance not to produce the code, but to build comprehension while doing so, whether by asking follow-up questions, requesting explanations, or posing conceptual questions while coding independently. The end quote. So I read this article like last Thursday or Friday, and I was actually having a conversation with my 80-plus-year-old father-in-law over email about AI and coding assistance and like how I was using it. And it caused me to think a little bit more about how do I really use it versus like the vibe coding stuff that I see people doing online. And yes, there's a couple little things that I've done that are like one-time projects to where I need a screen scraper to get a bunch of data. I'm never going to run this thing again. But yes, I guess quote, I did vibe code it because I didn't really care. I didn't want to learn how to go through and to do it for this one site.
Yep.
But how I usually end up doing it is I kind of use it as as a paired programmer to where like it's my teammate and say, look, I want you next to me. Don't bother me. Don't ever talk to me. But if I'm working through something, I want to explain, here's the situation. Here's some context. Here's what I think. What do you think? And it does like this deep kind of look and research on it. And it gives me other options. It goes, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. Here's the advantages and disadvantages. I'm like, well, what about this? What about this? Other follow-up things. Mm-hmm. And it forces me, not so much that I'm relying on AI to give me an answer to my question. It forces me to think through a problem more methodically and slower than just jumping in and starting to write something about it. Yeah. And that's the part where I find to get the most use from it. When I read this study, I was like, the people who got the mastery was when they were actually using it as like an assistant and like a helper, not so much as a task delegator. Right. And to me, that's what I really liked about this. And the article goes into a lot more depth on it. I found it just be another one of these really interesting ones. This is the AI coding assistant stuff is just a fascinating space right now to me. And I thought this was a good one that people might be interested in.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about that a couple of times. And I think on our original AI one, we were talking about essentially, I only use it as sort of a glorified search assistant. So, I think that makes it more what you're talking about. Like it's not coding for me ever. So
my dogs don't apparently. I don't know if you could hear the dogs in the background, but apparently they're not big fans of it.
Apparently, no big deal.
Apparently my
kid didn't barge through the door, so we've got to win.
The dogs recognize her car. When they drive up, they both like start flipping out like, mom's home.
Mom's home.
Anyway.
Awesome.
Well, cool. Good episode.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
and you said we didn't have a whole lot to talk about. That was a good.
This is why I said you got to lead me through it. What do you want me to talk about?
We got it. All right. Anybody,
Awesome.
if you got any questions, follow-up questions about PnPjs, if you got anything else you want to hear about, any detail, any kind of like your niche kind of a thing that we didn't cover, send us a message. We'd love to drop a comment and on LinkedIn where we publish this episode, on YouTube, on Spotify, on everywhere on the socials. Let us know. We will see it, and we'd love to do another episode about this.
Sounds great.
Awesome. Good to see you again, Julie, and I will see you in Miami.
See you in Miami.
All right. Bye, everybody. Did you like this episode? Please like and share it with your friends. We're on YouTube, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn. You'll find all the links in the video description below. And if you have a question, head over to our site at codedeploygo.live, where you can send it in. Also, sign up for our mailing list on our site at codedeploygo.live to learn about future episodes, opportunities for listeners, and get the show notes from each episode sent straight to your inbox. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks.